This game, we will take a look at my game against Grandmaster David Navara. This is in the Charity Cup in March 2022. So we were playing in the quarterfinal of the Charity Cup, and this is the first game of the match. I had the white pieces, so my opponent chose the Ragozin defense. I went with this with a 4 A3 line. Not exactly a surprise because I already played several times, but I guess the position was still fresh enough. And I'm not sure my opponent was well prepared here, but perhaps somewhere he forgot his prep because he started taking quite a little bit of time at this stage. And the reason I chose this line to play for white is because it offers a very unbalanced position. So first of all, it's clear that white play a lot of moves with the queens. Queen a4 and then some a3, then bishop g5. The queen will eventually have to go back, so that's at least two move with the queen. Black should be fine. Black did not do anything wrong. Obviously, he developed all the pieces naturally. However, the position is unbalanced because the pawn structure is not symmetrical. White has the bishop pair. Black is still very solid, but black has to show something. Black has to play a bit concretely. Otherwise, if white is allowed to consolidate, if white has enough time to castle, maybe play e3, queen c2, c4, white will just have the better position. Open up the position, bishop pair, the better center. So black has to do something. So this is not easy to do, especially in rapid chess, because in rapid you have 15 minutes, 10 minutes for the whole game, and you have to make those decisions early on. So for black, should black try to play aggressively with g5, knight e4? Should black try to play in the center with maybe b6, knight a5? Should black exchange knight with knight e5, knight f3? Should black try to play c5? So basically, black has a lot more decisions to make than white. White is basically just reacting to what black is doing. If black plays g5, white will go bishop g3. If black moves the knight on c6, white will move the queen. If black castle, white will go e3, bishop e2. Basically, white's plan is a lot easier to understand than black's plan. So in the game, we continue with this position. He went rook e8. Again, very logical move, but at some point, black will have to make a decision. So after I play queen c2, this is that moment. Black has to decide whether he wants to play g5 or he wants to play knight a5 and c5, or how is he going to create some counterplay. So this is already quite pleasant, practically at least, in the sense that you force your opponent to make some tough decisions, and then your position is easier to play. So in the game, Grandmaster Navara decided to play actively with g5 and knight e4. Nothing wrong with this. However, you have to be ready to deal with this position after 92. So obviously, the point of 92 is to release the pressure on this knight on e4 immediately, because I don't want to allow black to time to play h5, h4. So with the move 92, I challenge the knight on e4 right away. If black takes on g3, white would be very happy because of h takes g3, opening up this h5 for the rook, and potentially white will go bishop e3, maybe king f1, rook e1, and then e4, f4. So after 92, my opponent's played bishop f5, which is a good move. Now I decided to take on e4, and move to d1. So at first sight, it looks a little strange. Why? Because the queen went to a4, then to c2, and then back to d1. I still didn't complete my development. It looks totally ridiculous for white. But the problem is, black's king is quite vulnerable here. So even though black is ahead in development and he already completed all the moves that he wanted to make, he just had to move the queen to connect the rooks and so on. The bishop looks very active here, but in reality, black lacks a concrete plan here. So there's no real attack on white's position. f5, f4 doesn't really work for black because of f3. Knight a5, c5 will take some time to achieve. In the meantime, white's plan is a lot easier. White wants to play h4, opening up the king side. Sometimes the queen can go to h5. So I believe in practice this is easier to play for white. Now, probably the best move for black would be knight to e7, trying to bring the knight to f5, attack g3 and e3. So if white goes f3, then black can go back to f7, and then knight to f5. For example, bishop e3, black can go knight f5, white has to take on f5, bishop f5, king f2, and black would be okay here. Black can go to d7, f6, and keep the king side closed. And it should be okay for black. But in the game, my opponent played a very natural move, but perhaps already a mistake. Queen d7, connecting the rooks, but not challenging my bishop on g3. And now, after the move h4, it is already difficult for black. So if black leaves the pawn on g5, I will just take hg, followed by queen h5. This is very dangerous, the attack on h5. So he decided to play the move g4 to keep the king side closed. But now this is a problem for black. This pawn on g4 is weak, and I continue with h5, leaving the h4 square for my rook. So this is already very, very unpleasant for black. He went with king h7, rook h4. Perhaps not the best way to play, but I feel like this plan is very natural for white. I just put pressure on the g4 pawn. If he plays f5, then potentially this bishop can be in trouble. For example, I can try to play bishop f1 back, and then potentially bishop f4, f3. And computer says black is still okay here, but in practice it feels very risky to leave the bishop stranded on e4. So it's very understandable when my opponent moves back the bishop to f5. However, this gives white a free hand to play the move c4. Now that the pawn on g2 is not hanging anymore, white would play c4 and get rid of the positional issue. If white is too slow in playing c4, then black would get knight on a5 and c4, and black would be okay. But after c4, black is not in time to do that anymore, and white now has the center and the bishop pair. So this is what I was aiming for from the opening. The bishop pair and the center. If for some reason black makes some slow move, then white will have time to achieve everything. So here, black should have played this move knight to e7 and tried to capture on d5 with the knight. It would have better chances to hold this position, but made a mistake with the move knight to a5, and then after c takes d5 with d5 with c1. This is already losing for black, because white has a very strong threat of rook c5 attacking the queen and the two minor pieces. So he had to play the move b6 to stop rook c5, but then I just got this pawn on g4, and eventually the black position was still weakening to be so yeah, he sacrificed the exchange, but that didn't save black. I don't really need to comment on those moves because the move I'm not difficult. I just have to be a little careful of some tricks. Eventually the black king is too weakened, and I won after a few more moves. So yeah, so this game, I think the lesson from this game is to watch out for unbalanced positions. So practically, and I think this applies to all kinds of chess, classical, rapid, list, but especially in shorter time controls, it's very difficult when your opponent has the initiative, the bishop pair, or the center. So in those cases, you have to try to play very active, but not opening up too much, not weakening your king too much. Otherwise, you will have problems like in this game for black. So in this game, I really like the way that I created problems for my opponents. It wasn't anything substantial, but the pressure built up every move, and basically I gave my opponents a lot of choices, but none of the choices were satisfying, and he was having to spend a lot of time on the clock and doubting himself. So basically, that's the psychological advantage as well, that unbalanced positions can bring that advantage to you. So let's move on to another game.
I should white aim to break the part black hits on.